What's good, YouTube? This is Anti-Yami here, and I'm going to talk about two trap cards. One being the infamous Trap Stun, and the other one being Wiretap. And there's been plenty of debates going on talking about which is the most optimal trap. And I'm here to talk about both those cards today. And hopefully this video will help you determine which card will be more appropriate to the deck. Because obviously, in my opinion, I think it's all deck dependent versus, other reasons which card is better. Because I think both of them are really relevant, good cards. So, let's jump into the Trap Stun. Trap Stun. Negate the effect of all other traps on the field during this turn. So that means that you can't choose to activate trap cards on the end phase, such as this. I use this as an example. There's a trap card that's out called Glorious Illusion, and I know a lot of players do not play this card anymore, but we're using this as an example. So it's a Lightsworn card, and basically its effects are: activate this card by targeting one Lightsworn monster in your graveyard. Special summon that target in face-up attack position. During each of your end phases, send the top two cards of your deck to the graveyard. When this card leaves the field, destroy that monster. And when the monster leaves the field, destroy that card. So basically, it's like a Call of the Haunted for Lightsworns, and it has an added effect to mill two cards on the end phase. So if Trap Stun is activated on that turn, you cannot choose to let Trap Stun resolve over and then choose to mill cards. So Trap Stun is completely last thing that happens, and then it goes away. Everything else has to happen before Trap Stun. Nothing can happen during the Trap Stun. So cool. Another thing is also popular of Trap Stun is that it means that traps on the field are negated. So if the trap cards are activated and somehow are removed from the field, then the trap card will still resolve. So I use Emergency Provision, and basically this, I know this card is banned or whatever, but this also represents MSTs too. No matter how the cards are removed from the field, as long as they are removed. So basically, if I play Jar of Greed, for example, and they chain Trap Stun, and if that were resolved backwards, Trap Stun will negate the Jar of Greed. Now, if I chain link 3, chain MST to it, removing the Jar of Greed to the field to the graveyard, then Trap Stun will then resolve, negating no traps, and Jar of Greed will get its effect to draw one card. Because Trap Stun is only to negate cards that are face up on the field, not anywhere else. So, another cool thing about that too. And there's another example of a card. It's called Forgotten Temple of the Deep. And obviously this is a Yumi card, so I'm pretty sure nobody runs this card again. But the trap states that while this card is face up on the field, is named Yumi. And since Trap Stun will negate the effect, the card would not be known as Yumi. So any monsters on the field that requires Yumi to get their effect would not happen. And also, it would not be named Yumi. It will be named Unknown or the actual name of the trap card. So, no Yumi on the field, which is really cool. And another thing about Trap Stun is that you still have to pay costs. Cost happens no matter what. I don't care what card happens or negates or anything, whatever. If you play a card, it has a cost. You have to resolve the cost first, and then the effect will happen. So if Trap Stun's already active on the field, and a trap card would activate to cause effects, so like Solemn Warning or something of that nature, you still have to pay the 2,000 life points. Then it'll negate itself. So cool thing about that with Trap Stun. And then now we have the cool Infinite Trap, Wiretap, which is a counter trap. So keep a note that counter trap is relevant because it's a speed spell 3, and the only thing that can resolve or act in speed spell 3s or other speed spell 3s, so you can't just like simply MST after, you know, in chaining of. So here's a cool thing. So whenever a trap card is activated, you can negate the activation of it and shuffle it back to the deck. So it's not too much going on with this card. Basically, it's a self-explanatory. Whenever a trap card is activated, can't hit more than one trap card, it'll shuffle the card back into the deck. So again, if there's a cost to it, like Solemn Warning, then you play that as life points, then it gets shuffled back to the deck. So Wiretap, easy self-explanatory, not merely rulings on that card. So if you want to play a card over because it's easy to understand, then hey, go for it, which is really cool. But here's some differences, and I guess different decks that will play the card differently, which is awesome. First off, we got SHADDOLLs. Now, in my opinion, I feel like SHADDOLLs are better off playing Wiretap, and here's the reason. A lot of the decks, and I'm pretty sure this is still popular, but a lot of people are still playing artifacts. Now, artifacts, you do not want them to go off, and sometimes in retrospect, I guess the Sanctums are really bad draws if you draw into it, because you can't really use it on the turn that you draw it. And if you can shove it back into your deck, or into your opponent's deck, then they have to worry about not top decking a Moral Tech, which is another problem too. That's whatever. But the reason why I feel like Wiretap will be better in this deck specifically, because again, the deck doesn't get wrecked by too many traps, and it doesn't have a nuking capability. You know, they can gain advantage and pick off traps because they have cards like Dragon to help get rid of traps and things of that nature, and it can kind of bait out back row, which is really great for them. If you're playing Light Swarm version, you have Delilah. So I think they're really scared of cards like Vanity's Emptiness, and I think Vanity's Emptiness is basically the main thing I thought they were really scared of. And of course, if you top deck a Wiretap, you can't deal with the Vanity's Emptiness, but those main deck cards I talked about, SHADDOLLs can deal with the Vanity's Emptiness. Because Vanity's Emptiness is only made to stop their SHADDOLL fusion. So if you can get off a Lila or a Dragon effect, then I think you should be okay. So for the second deck I have Burning Abyss. Burning Abyss, in my opinion, I think Trap Stun is obviously 10 times better because most of the deck is already chainable traps, which is really awesome. And for the mirror match, it's really good off to shut off your opponent's quick effects or quick traps. And they don't have a nuking feel per se, but it's more optimal than it is on Wiretap, because Wiretap, nothing really in that deck really disturbs them very much. So they don't really have problems with one trap. I feel like if they can shut off the whole back row, then they can get off their little silly plays or whatever, and then from there they can tackle on multiple things. So in Trap Stun, it requires, let's say, like, if they make a Dante, wouldn't say first turn, let's just say they go second, and you set like Phoenix Wind Blast and Compose. So if you summon Tour Guide and they special summon a monster and then they overlay into a Dante, and let's just say, I know this is not first turn or whatever, but let's say they have the Trap Stun set and the Wiretap. Let's just say in both scenarios they're both set. Now, let's say your opponent decides to Compose. If you chain Wiretap there, then they can wait on any time to play Finish Wind Blast anytime they want to at that turn when fit necessary. But if you were to Trap Stun to the Compose, then they had to force play the Finish Wind Blast, and that might not have been the correct play at that time. But since they don't want the Dante to go off, then they have to react in. And versus other traps too, they're really good too. So just that little small example. So I feel like in that deck, Wiretap would not be optimal. It would be more Trap Stun. Alright, for the third deck, we have Stellarknights. And Wiretap is my choice, because this is more of a stun control variant deck. and it will be better off because they don't want to cut off all their traps because they play a good healthy number of traps, more than, I don't know, probably like 20 traps or whatever in that deck. So for them to play cards that can cut off their own resources, which would be pretty bad, I feel like this deck will work well with WIRETAP, just because of the number of traps that are in the deck. And it's a stun-based deck, I guess. Not necessarily stun, but it controls a lot of the plays with their traps and some rank 4 exceeds that they have. So I feel like WIRETAP would be optimal in that deck. Light Swarms, let's just say plain Jane Light Swarms, trap stun, because for one, they don't play any traps, and two, they can make some really good plays, and they got some nuking plays too. Like they can make Black Rose, and they can play JD safely, and they can OTK pretty easily. So I think in the OTK deck, I think trap stun would be really good because they can cut off all their traps, and you can make some really powerful plays and pushes and win from there. So Light Swarms, I would say definitely say trap stun. Plants, I would say trap stun too, because plants have a more long variety of plays they can do, and for them to cut off all their back row and make their power plays, which is really good, especially in like a GIGAPLANT variant where they can have 3-card set and just cut off one trap. It's not strong enough in my opinion, because they can have a breakthrough skill, or they can have a warning and a compulse, and the WIRETAP in that deck would not just won't work, because one of those 3 cards can just easily cut off their combos and they're in a bad position. So trap stun in that deck. Mermails is a funny case. I feel like they can get away with playing both, because some variants can be really trap heavy and some variants cannot be really trap heavy. And I've seen some trap stun tricks that can cut off their Abyss Sphere and keeping it on the field. I mean, I've seen it all. So I think in the decks that we're talking about, I feel like Mermails can get away with both. So it all depends on their playing style in that scenario. For the next one, I have Dragons. In my opinion, since Dragons are super strong effect driven decks, and it can also play some really strong spells, I feel like Trap Stun will be better in this deck, because, and I guess they can almost get away with both, but more on to the Trap Stun variant, because they can make cards like Black Rose pretty easily, and they do play like a lot of push plays, and cutting off their back row, setting up a really, really powerful field with Drago Sacks and stuff. And some decks do play skill drain, so it'll be really cool to see a skill drain cut off only on your turn. To do some really cool extra deck monster effects, and then put the skill drain back on them. Same thing with Vayne's Emptiness in that deck. You can cut off the Vayne's Emptiness, make a field, and apply the pressure back on your opponent's turn with special summon monsters, and the Vayne's Emptiness coming back on in their turn. So I feel like Vayne's Trap Stun would do great in that deck. Next deck, Batteries. Same scenario here with the Plants and the Dragons with their really strong plays and maybe cool ways to OTK. Can shut off all their opponent's back row and then make the big push to win the game. Really strong. And then for our last example, which our last deck, will be Gadgets. And since Gadgets are not as fast and not as prone, and again, they play a lot of numerous trap cards in the deck, and just like the STELLARKNIGHT issue, you don't want to cut off your traps. So I think in that deck, WIRETAP will be the better card choice, because the deck is slow and grindy, and it feeds off advantage of your opponent. And they don't have really nuking capabilities. They have Extension Knight or a Cyton Knight, but the scenarios of that actually working in their favor is very slim. So I feel like WIRETAP is better for that deck. Alright, thank you guys for listening. Hope you find this really, really informative. Sorry I didn't go into too much details on which is better, but I feel like these are my personal choices for these decks. All opinion based. Not saying this is actually the best thing, but if I were to play the deck and I had to choose one between those two traps, I would choose the traps I would have said in the videos. And there's also, you can play these two other decks too that has similar playstyles, so use those accordingly. And alright, thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Alright. Later.